Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Exhibition Cadet Sabir Shah for my channel Aviation Cadet 9936, and I will talk about the tragic air crash of Air India flight AI-171. Now the course of this investigation and the media perception has entered into a new battle, and that is between Boeing and the other pilots. And right now, the Boeing is accusing the pilots for having this tragic crash, and the most of the pilots are accusing the aircraft or the Boeing or the Air India, the administration, for having this crash. So I will throw 4 points from both the sides, what they're thinking, 4 points each, and what pilots are thinking, 4 points each. And during these 4 points, my initial theory of single engine failure at the takeoff, and right after takeoff, the second engine got failed. I will put more evidence that how that theory still stands. And no one has talked about that theory so far. I'm the only one. And let's see what happens in the final report. And when did the engines flame out, we will come to know. So let's get to point number 1, Boeing. Boeing has rats deployed, and pilots are asking questions about the rat deployment. Now, what kind of rats does Boeing have? If you see the international media, for example, Wall Street journals, and I think it's routers or routers or routers. UE is pronounced as U, so I would say routers. But people also say routers. So that news channel and Wall Street Journal, very authentic news channels, and they do not go and hanky-panky and get the things from like not that those kind of sensational media. No. Before the report was published, Wall Street Journal put out a very clear-cut indication that this engine was failed, or this aircraft got crashed because of the fuel switches. How does Wall Street Journal know? They do not have any direct access to God. Okay, so someone must have told them. And a person who tells something to another person, irrelevant person, we call the person a rat. Very famous term used, especially in the gangster mafia world. They call the person who sells them out, they call them the rat. So Boeing's rats are deployed in Air India because any investigation has happened. The only people who knew about it, of course, they have leaked this information. There's no other way. So Boeing is using those rats and trying to blame the pilots. I mean, Boeing is not directly accusing the pilots, but I mean, through their media channels, for example, all these American TikTokers, Captain Steve, Meet Kevin, Jeffrey Oboy, although Jeffrey Oboy, he did a good neutral analysis, but I mean, still, these people are speaking for Boeing. Now, pilots. The pilots are asking one question about the rats. Now, these are not the rats which I mentioned just now. These are the random air turbine. I don't know why these American TikTokers call it turbine. Turbine is something just Indians wear on the head. Okay, turbine. So this jet air turbine, and now this is very crucial because the rat is deployed. It's not deployed on the ground. The rat is deployed in the air. Okay, I have asked many of the engineers of Boeing 787 and also those who work on the airports. They try, and the computer system makes sure that it doesn't get deployed on the ground. It only gets deployed when it thinks it's airborne. Now, how does a plane think the plane is airborne? There are a few parameters. I'll just talk about 2 or 3. One is the indicated airspeed, the rotational airspeed when the aircraft crosses, like in this case, it was 155 knots. So once the aircraft senses 155 knots, it thinks that it needs to, lift up, although you need to put this pressure at the stick, back pressure on the stick. That's one indication. Second is the gears. Once the plane is on the ground, the gears are tilted a little bit outwards because of the weight, because of the pressure, because of all the things, passengers. So as soon as the aircraft rolls, the weight and the lift, they get almost equal to each other. So this pressure on the gears is less. So gears start to tilt towards inside a bit, not a lot, not like the Volkswagen. Volkswagen wheels are also this way. As soon as the car gets faster, they go upwards. Planes are in the opposite direction. So as soon as those rods, they touch the switches, the current is supplied, and then right away the FDR knows, okay, now the computer system knows, now I'm airborne. So that's the second indicator. So there are many parameters to know. And also, once you give it a density, altitude, and as soon as the altimeter hits 1 foot above ground level, the aircraft knows I'm in airborne mode. So there are many ways. There are 7 other parameters, but I'm just talking about 3 of them. So once 2 engines fail, 1 engine fail, or 2 engines fail, the indication to deploy the RAT is there. The computer sends the signal to the mechanical body of RAT, deploy the RAT. So that signal is recorded in FDR. But physically, no. It only gets out once the aircraft takes off. Once the aircraft is airborne, then physically it gets deployed. But signal was sent long ago. So this is what has happened. Why? Because the RAT started to give the hydraulic power at 08:47 seconds. 08 minutes and 47 seconds. So for Airbus and for Boeing, for the RAT to be deployed, it takes 6 seconds. And then starts to rotate, it takes 2 more seconds. And that hydraulic pressure or the electrical pressure, the current starts to go towards the parts, 2 more seconds, 10 seconds. That means 47 is the time when it started giving the hydraulic pressure, minus 10 seconds, 37 seconds, 8 minutes and 37 seconds UTC. But the aircraft was on the runway at that time because the liftoff, the rotation, nose rotation was at 39 seconds, 0839, and liftoff when rear wheels got into the air was at 42 seconds. So the aircraft was pretty much rolling when engines failed, signal was sent, and it went into the air. And as soon as the engines are cut off, engines lose their power, the pilots can hear abnormalities on the engines. Even people can hear. Just today, in AirBlue, just yesterday, AirBlue flight was taken off from Lahore airport, and a bird got sucked into the left engine, and you could hear the voice. It's totally different. So pilot sitting in the cockpit can't see the bird getting in, but he heard a different malfunction voice. And so right away, he was not at V1, so pulled the throttles back and they got down. But they didn't even take off. They just aborted the takeoff. And exactly the same case over there. So once the pilot flying, he saw what happened. The engines, spooled down. They already had the indications of engine failure 1, engine failure 2, or whatever, They had the indications, and that's where the SOPs get clicked in. And SOPs are switch off the fuel switch and turn it on. So that was point number 1. Who is winning? I think pilots are winning. Point number 2. So in point 2, Boeing is fully supported by Air India, because at the end of the report, they clearly mentioned that there was no problem with the engines, with the aircraft. So Boeing uses that line and gets the clean chit, and that's what their TikTokers, they come up and they say, well, see, the report says that. But pilots, on the other hand, using the same question, the aircrafts, the machines' capabilities, machines' queries and malfunctions happened in the past. And of course, they also say that definitely if Boeing is accused, the administration, the engineering job would also be accused because we didn't maintain the aircraft very well. So I think here, pilots are still winning. Point number 3. Point number 3 is about the probability. Now, I don't know, first time it was Jeff Ostroff who used this term of having dual engine failure on Boeing 787 is 1 out of 100 billion. Now, I don't know where did this 100 billion figure come in? Why not 1,000 billion, a trillion? Why not 10 billion, 1 billion? Why 100 billion? So that means this figure has no mathematical backup. Because if we only take 787, the average life of a Boeing 787-8 is 44,000 cycles. That means 44,000 takeoffs and landings. That's the average life of one aircraft. And I checked Google, thank you, Google University, almost 5 million takeoffs and landings have been done. And so it should be 1 out of 5 million. The one we have flown so far. And there are 1,100 aircrafts in the world, so if you multiply that by 44,000 cycles, takeoffs and landings, on the average in the future too, that's going to be 48 million takeoffs and landings by Boeing 787-8. So it should be 1 out of 48 million the most, and then 1 out of, so far they have flown 5 million. So it should be 5 million and 40, but where does this 100 billion come from? I have no idea. So this was a made-up number to show people that dual engine cannot happen, but the pilots, they came up with 2019, the Osaka flight that had dual engine failure right on landing. So it happened at least once. So no matter how many billions of times, it did happen within 5 millions of times. So it can happen again. So point number 3, I think, still pilots are winning. Point number 4. Point number 4 is Boeing says that just the billion figure I said, there is more chances of having a human involved in the error than the machine, because the machine systems are really perfect and their backup system is great, and even if you have so many failures, you can't have a catastrophic failure on Boeing 787-8. That's what the claim is, and that's how Boeing says, oh, we are amazing, we cannot have any problems. But pilots use the same thing. Again, the examples I gave of these two occasions when the dual engine failure has happened on Boeing 787-8. And the second one is, see, the backup systems of this airplane are pretty much amazing, no doubt about that. So computer can do anything without even letting the pilots know. When it senses, just like I said, the liftoff sensors, when does the aircraft know that it's airborne? Through those sensors and through those parameters. So anytime when the aircraft thinks it is under control, it needs, although it hasn't been given the command to do something, but when it thinks that it has to do this action at this time of the flight, it would do that. Then pilots cannot stop. And that's what happened in 787 MAX as well. When it thought that, okay, I have to go for a nosedive, it auto-trimmed it, boom, into the ground. No input was given by the pilot. It was just a small input that we were going to descend, and then that descent went vertical down. So, and again, Osaka, Japan Airlines, the airplane actually thought that it's still on the ground. It is on the ground, and the reverse thrust levers, when they were pulled, it thought, ooh, the pilot's going to commit a suicide. So it turned off the engines within 1 second difference right away, and then that was never being discussed ever. So let's suppose if there was a dual engine failure, the aircraft computer system knows what to do. It doesn't just sit idle. It doesn't need a pilot's input, although it's good for a pilot to turn off the switches and turn it on, just like we reboot the computer when it has a problem. We always do that, right? When ignition is not working, we start off on. Similar concept, not the similar procedure, but the similar concept is that although it would kick in automatically, even a dual engine failure happens, the FCS, the computer system, the FADEC, would kick in right away by itself and do it by itself. But if there is a manual input for telling, how do you tell the computer? You get this fuel switch to off position and then switch it to on position. And then you deploy the RAD manually. So this is how the FADEC will be 100% sure, okay, I have all other indications, and I have the fuel cutoff supply information too, and now it is being to run position again. Now I need to restart the engine, and then we're just going to open the APU updates and start giving power to the engine, because APU also needs air intake. So the door opens, it gets the air in and starts to work. That's a mini engine, and that's what exactly has happened here. So here also, pilots are having the edge. Until the final report, they have to make a huge blunder, go against the law of aviation, go against the aerodynamics law and aero engines laws, and then they can come and blame the pilots. But the thing is, there were more in number. I mean, there have been 70,000 videos on this Air India flight accident, and most of the videos are talking about pilot error. And international media is projecting that one, but it's a good thing that there's a voice against them too. So now let's come to the final one, conclusion. My theory was that one of the engines was less than 50% of power once they were given the takeoff. They can't abort because Boeing 787-8 has a capability to take off under one engine with all the maximum load and all these weather conditions. Boeing 787-8 can take off with one engine, but the other engine was working little, which will be proven in the report later when I will discuss about that. And then it went. So once they just crossed V1, the second engine started to roll back. Now, engine 1 is already doomed. Engine 2 started to roll back, but they can't abort. So, and both the engines have been failed. Two theories here. Probably the captain put it off and then turned it on. But when the first officer, the pilot flying, when he asked, hey, why did you cut off? Now, we can't, because at that time the pilot is looking in front and his peripheral view is not even that much. He is cornered. He's looking at horizon in front. He's looking at the central line, maintaining central line. He doesn't want to deviate left and right. He has to stay on that one. So, people get tense. Muscle gets stretched once you have to do these things on the ground. Trust me. But this is a very, tense mode where all your muscles, they get stiff up and you are trying to maintain your center line and keep your nose up and keep you're too busy to view that. So this line has been taken from, I think, taxiway, but maybe he probably cut off when this engine had a problem. So maybe he had cut off one of the switches. We don't know. Or flaps cut off. There are many things which you can cut off on not only the fuel switch, okay? So we also call them cut off. So it's not in the context of what has happened. So theory 1, the pilot, once on rotational, because his hands are free, right? You just need to put the throttle, the captain monitoring. And to give the signal to the engine, to the FADEC, yeah, he probably would have turned off, turned on again, and turned off and turned on again. Probably. That's theory number 1. And then, once they got to the 50 second, that was the time when they got it back. And one engine got relighted, but the second one did not, the right engine. See, and one relighted and started giving EGT. Engine 2 had EGT, but it did not decelerate because, as I said, it already had a problem. So a suicidal pilot would never go and start to restart the engines again. One. Now, theory number two, let's go back to the takeoff again. They had no idea. Okay? On takeoff roll, maybe they didn't notice the engine change sound, they didn't notice anything, no warning lights were turned on, and once the aircraft once it crossed V1, the second engine got filled, FADEC took over. What does FADEC do? FADEC does switches off the fuel and switches it on. Okay, that's a standard operating procedure for FADEC to work under these kind of conditions. It's a smart computer. So that's why when the pilot, now that could be from there, hey, why did you cut off? And he's flying. And he heard that voice, he heard the sound, maybe warning light appeared. Why did you cut off the fuel switch? The captain wanted, I did not. And then they checked, holy cow. They were physically not turned off or on. They were still at that position, down position, but electrical signals told. So that's where they said, okay, now we know it took them 10 seconds to realize that, okay, for this we need to, because it would make sense, right? They're looking here, what happened? Oh, they're all on, okay, let's send the signal again. They say position from off to on position, but transition from off to on position. But I think that was it. Now pull down, pull up. And that's where FADEC got signal. Left the engine, started to ignite again. The right engine didn't, because the right engine had a problem from the taxiway onwards, or maybe from the tarmac onwards, or maybe from the gate 34 where it was parked from then onwards. So why did the second engine fail out? Now you can think about all the theories of vapor lock, fuel contamination, electrical failure, major catastrophic electrical failure. Think about that. One engine was damaged. In order to, make it cemented plaster, if at 300 feet above ground level, RAT was deployed, gears were down, flaps were down, 180 knots. The glide ratio of Boeing is less than 3.5. This plane would not have crossed the perimeters of the airport, but yet it went beyond that. It traveled on ground 1,700 meters and then got crashed into a building that was about 100 feet above ground level. Means if that building was not there, that could have glided for another 700 to 800 meters. See, from 300 meters, it went down to 200 meters and traveled 1,700 meters. So more 100 meters down would have traveled at least 1/3 of 600 to 700 meters. It would have landed somewhere in the ground in front. But that building and many things, so pilots did what they could do. So I don't think so that Air India or Boeing can blame this one pilot. You have to defy the aviation laws, you have to defy the physics, law of physics, and you have to defy the aero engines laws and the basic principle of how Boeing 787-8 works. So I declare the pilots winners. Allah Hafiz.